constructed if you're just like, all right, so for my 1, and just change those 8s down to 7s, and maybe even ending on that slide up to the 7th fret for that 4 chord, right? So you're like, it seems like a little bit more constructed for the guitar rather than just like kind of music theory to pull it together, and then anything you're doing for the 4 chord can always be like, you know, up 2 frets for the 5, and then back down to the 4. One last thing that I want to show you real quick is on that 5 chord. That's our 5, the 5th fret of the 2nd string. So you can do for that 5 chord 5 8 5 6 7, and that outlines the blues scale on the 5 chord. And it's a super wild way to break out of your normal 12 bar. There's 2 ways to kind of visualize that. So check this out. You got, so when you're doing like for the 4 chord and then back to the 1, when you get to the 5, it's like this like super rapid 5 8 on the 2nd string, 5 6 7 on the bottom string. Yep, and it's just like, it really brings the ear together for that 5 chord, because it just like, it snaps you into like that position for the 5 chord. That's one way to really break out of the 5, and the other way is this, which I really like, starting on that and then kind of sliding from 8 to 9. So it's like, yep, 5 8 9, and then 7 7 on the bottom. Yep, on the B, and then the 7s are on the bottom on the E. So 5 8 to 9, 7 7, and then a little like 9 bend up, back to 7. So like all over that 5 chord. You know, and then that kind of stuff over the 4 chord, or whatever, when we're kind of like leaning into that 7th fret on the B, and then back to the 1. So those 2 things alone will really pull the changes out. So you got that, or to go super minor blues for that 5 chord, and these tricks are awesome, and they're those things that you kind of like want, like kind of back there, that you don't utilize all the time. It's definitely one of those things where like, if every time you get to that 5 chord, it's always that, and then that for the 4 chord, it's like, all right, we like almost heard that before, because it's so jarring. It's almost like it's going to stick out enough where if you do it too many times, it's going to be a little bit obvious. So what I love to tell people is like, if you're just kind of sticking to that blues scale, that pentatonic, every other one, do something that really that pulls those changes out, you know, in a different way every time, is definitely going to work. So let's just take those ideas, and I know that was a lot, and this is a little bit more 5 chord focused. So take those 2 5 chord ideas and see if you can stick them in somewhere and see how they sound to you, because you might play it against this 12 bar blues and just be like, yeah, I mean, that, you know, I don't really like that sound, because that is super out of the original basis of that blues key, you know what I mean? So let's just try a couple of those. So blues, it'll probably work. I want to see if we can do two bars of a solo, and then 2 bars of rest, and then 2 bars of a solo, 2 bars of rest, and then the same for the ending. This is really going to split it up. Now, something to think about too, that we do a lot, is when we have that. A lot of times we really we always love coming back to that root note, because it's like super, super pleasant. So think about just the last note that you're playing. If you do any note that's next to the root note in the pentatonic, it's gonna give a little need for it. Yeah, and building that tension up, and especially like if you go to that 4 chord, that 7 on the 2nd string is really gonna leave it hanging. Resolution is it really is the last note. Where if I do something like this, right, all of that built up a little bit of tension for the root note, right? But that phrase is still settled now. Where if I were to do the opposite of that, because now I'm ending on a tense note, one of the notes next to the root note, that ends with tension now. So it really is like the most tension building, especially when we're talking about 2 measures of playing, 2 measures of rest, 2 measures of playing, is like that last note of that phrase is almost like just like an echo for the rest. You know what I mean? So you got to figure out, like, do you want it to just echo and everything be fine? And that means if everything's fine, you don't have to keep playing. You might want to leave it as like, oh, I need to hear more. So that's like a few ways to think about it, and really focusing on those ending notes. Now, the other thing too, some people still like to hear less tension, but I have had students that do a lot of, and now it's like, okay, every phrase is ending on a tension note, and it's like, where is my final release? So you can really play around with it. The sort of like Freddie King, and those guys, that sort of style was very much like ending on a tension, ending on a resolution, ending on a tension, and ending on a resolution, just sort of this call back and forth. But you have that freedom to build up as much tension as you want, or make it as easy as you want. So try that. Let's do the 2 measures on, 2 measures rest, and focusing on those solos. And it doesn't have to be exactly 2 measures. If you want to sort of like end, like a lot of people will end on the 1 of like the 3rd measure and like let that rest out. So like that still counts. You don't have to be like so worried about only fitting in the 2 bars. But yeah, let's do that and like really think about the last notes that we're hitting. And since we have the options, when we get to that 4 chord, we might want to hit that, right, and not resolve, because even though that note is the 5th degree of the 4 chord, our root note in the blues, because how we were talking about the blues before, because it's set up in A, it's still gonna have a release feel. It's still gonna feel like the finality of that phrase, even though it's like not quite. And that's even sometimes the same when it goes to the 5 chord, even over that. So yeah, let's just get into that a little bit and see if we can hear out some of the ending blues. It's a little bit easier to hit those notes for each one of the chords, but it does make it a little bit difficult to do the 2 measures on and 2 measures off. Just know that, yeah, but it's like, you know what, and I didn't even realize until you put on that slow blues that I was like, ooh, that's like really hard, because that's so much space, you know what I mean? And now your playing is a little bit different than a lot of students playing, where they come in and they, like, there's things that students are afraid of when they're starting to like get really into improv. One is repetition and one is space. So when we get a lot of this, it's like people will literally not want to play, even in a fast lick, the same note twice. You know what I mean? Like they want to like hurry up and get to the next note, So that's an issue of repetition, even when it comes to just doing, almost the same exact thing 2 times in a row. Now, not only repetition but space. It is amazing where if you're in a jam, and it's like your turn to take a solo, if you just come right in with that, space is setting up so much for the rest of your solo, but it takes a lot. A lot of people are immediately going to jump in with and try to cram as much as they can in. So space is something to be worked out as well. So that's why with a slow blues, just playing 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 2, leaving that much space in there might be a bit much. So let's see if we can find an A blues that has a little bit more quickness to it. It's going to be easier to find one that's actually in blues and not minor. That's a little bit faster. So let's see if there's one when you're thinking about playing the blues and you can start blending the two. So I like that. That question is, one is either modal playing, or this is basically what we do in rock or whatever, where you kind of have your key, in your scale over the whole progression. What happens in jazz is it's every change has its own scale to it, right? Its own, whether it's a mode or sometimes it's even more advanced than just that. So that's why it is cool to look at it in 2 different ways. And you get a lot of players that are able to kind of play that one chord, looking at it really like A mixolydian, and then D mixolydian and E mixolydian, and even messing with those, like some of those guys will do a mixolydian with a sharp 11. It's wild. But so it's not terrible to think of it kind of happening in 2 different ways, because it is very different. If you're really playing, what we're doing is kind of just taking the blues scale and adding one note in for each one of the chords. So that has a little bit of that feel to it, but just riffing on the blues scale or just playing over the changes. Those are 2 wildly different sounds, and being able to kind of blend the two is what I think would make a great solo. But I have my preferences. I definitely play a little bit more one hard blues scale with a couple of changes for each one of the chords, rather than a super modal way of playing. That's even why the 12-bar blues, has it's very different, like a jazz standard 12-bar blues, than just the 1-4-5 that we're kind of doing now. But not a bad idea to look at it that way,